into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Hello, good evening, Anders Lee. I'm Jake Flores, your Anders Lee.
Anders J. Lee evening here.
Jay Lee, right. This is Pod Damn America, the Gothic Socialist podcast for the stupid children. And Murray, he's also in the audience because he's a stupid child. Today, I'm really mad at him because he keeps biting me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I've got a number of interesting things to talk about up top, and I'm full of beans, so I'm just going to get right into it. Addendum to the bonus episode, if you listen to our Patreon episode, we talked about Syriza, the Greek leftist party, this weekend. At one point in the podcast, Anders brings up the idea that there's a sort of like bald music scene or bald cultural scene among guys who are bald and they hang out on the basis that they are bald. And I pushed back. And I said, I think maybe you're thinking of skinheads. I made a little joke, right? And then we talked about skinheads for a minute. Well, I am here to formally issue an apology to my co-host, Anders, because I was on the internet today, and I don't know if this is a thing where our phones are listening to us or something, but I saw an advertisement for something happening in Philadelphia called Abstract Louvre Presents Bald Fest. Free show for, number 4, for the baldies. You can, in parentheses, you can also come if you're not bald. It's very gracious of them. August 23rd, BYOB, BYOW, with a little heart emoji.
BYOW? Like
bring
women?
your own weed.
Oh, okay.
Bring your own women.
Like, what are they doing here? That's dark.
Anders.
Well, I don't. Like you said, bald can go in bad directions sometimes, but that's nice. Is it for us?
It would be bring your own white people. If it's the skinheads.
Yeah.
Bring your own white power.
I was just, I'm the first word with a W that came to my head was women because that's who I support. Actually, at the end of the day,
nice spin.
Is it for us by us? Like, do they insist that all the performers and presenters be bald?
I don't know. Let's read some more. August 23rd. This is Abstract Louvre is the guy, I guess. L-O-U-V. He says, August 23rd, I'm throwing a show at the Grays Ferry Skate Park. It'll be the first annual Bald Fest for the bald-headed and bald at heart. All are welcome.
Ooh.
Please come and support and show some love. Hashtag Philly, hashtag hip hop. I don't know. So someone's going to have to go find out. But apparently that wasn't real until this week, maybe. But there's a real bald culture out there, and I apologize for denigrating it.
It's a thing, yeah. And that, I respect people who are into being bald. I think it's I'm bald at heart, possibly. I've been told I have bald energy. But I got a friend who's bald, great guy who has two hairless cats.
Friends is bald.
One of my best friends is bald, and his cats are also bald. He has hairless cats, and he calls it the hairless household, his apartment.
That's pretty cool. I used to be a hater of those cats. Because I thought that when you picked it up, it would feel like a wrinkly ball sack, and I think they get a lot of hate and a lot of jokes for that. And I met one recently, and they're really cute actually, and they feel like a recently shaved like head or something. Like they've really
recently shaved. W.
Oh yeah,
belonging to. Interesting.
Woman of who is the president? I don't know. Weed.
That's what I thought you were gonna say, but interesting.
Oh no, I just meant like when you get a bald fade and you run your hands on the side of your head because it feels like really good to weird texture when you shave real close, and it's like gives you a kind of a ASMR feeling or whatever.
But
it's just like pussy, bro. No,
okay, you said it.
Well, you put the word out in the air, and someone had to pop the bubble there. Elephant in the room, shaved elephant in the room. But those cats they're cool. I like them now. They feel really good.
Then they have the grooves that some bald guys have this, or bald people have like the flesh kind of makes a shape on the head. This happens to Cory Booker sometimes, especially when they're like thinking or like reacting in some way with their face. It moves something on their head, and it kind of morphs. And I always want to touch it. I just want to like see what that's like to feel, because it's cool.
It looks fascinating. It looks like we're not supposed to be seeing it, you know?
Yeah, like you can see their brain at work when you have like the various things going on, the folds of head.
Bald guy who isn't actually bald but shaves his head, Anthony Fantano, in some hot water this week. I don't have a take on it. I think he's cool, but I haven't read that much about it. But I just figured since we're talking about bald guys, we throw
Is he not naturally bald?
I think he's like a guy who, if he didn't shave, it would grow into hair, and he chooses to be bald, which is a crazy way to be. But I get, it's his vibe. He's an intense-looking music critic.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. I don't know. Tell me if I shouldn't be. So there's an argument happening on Twitter, and I have not actually been on that much because it just kind of sucks. It's actually kind of defeating me. I don't care about Twitter right now. But I do check our emails, and I'll tell you this. We get a lot of emails from potential advertisers, people that want to hawk a thing on the show.
Hawkatua.
People want to hawkatua their product. They're going door to door hawkatuaing vacuum cleaners or whatever. And I generally turn stuff down. The way we kind of operate is actually, if we know someone, there's just like a line where you can tell, like, oh, this is a real person. This cause seems somewhat legitimate. This thing seems somewhat interesting. And it's not like, I generally tend to just delete or just ignore very formal sounding things. This is a thing about the way I perceive the world in general. If I get a handwritten letter in the mail, I'll read it. If I get something that's like, Mr. Senor Flores, often it's in Spanish, I'm like, when someone's trying to sell me something, this is disingenuous. I don't want to read one because it's like, there's a lot going on in this one. I think it's AI to begin with, but that it's also does not understand who we are. And this happens sometimes because people, who have like a agent or something does the booking for them. And so we get a lot of emails from people asking us to talk about something that is like antithetical to our show.
Yeah. Fire track. I love every time on SoundCloud. Sometimes we get like a record label bot commenting like, this track was fire. And it's like us talking about the Greek debt crisis or something.
I do think that was fire that we talked about that. Probably they didn't. So this one says, hi, Jake, Alex, and Anders. It thinks Alex is still on the show. It's
classic mistake.
I nearly spit out my coffee during your latest episode after the wild Street Fighter throwback and that truly chaotic AOC versus Trump banter. There's something about your ability to tackle massive issues and immediately ping-pong into, well, pubes, that keeps me tuned in every week. It got me thinking about just how much the, quote, news of the week, end quote, is shaped by the kind of dark comedy you bring, especially when the real world feels rigged from the top down. If you're ready to get even more medieval on broken systems, I'd like to suggest Mark Newman, CEO of Nomi Health, as your next guest. Mark's on a mission to call out the healthcare industry for what's really become a labyrinth of hidden fees, backroom deals, and opaque costs that squeeze both the working class and providers. He's the guy who will flat out say the system is set up to profit on our pain, while millions watch their paychecks evaporate and debt pile up just to see a doctor. So, a lot going on here. They think Alex is on the show. They, if this is a person, they listened to the episode and wrote this, but I really think that this is AI because, it's able to listen to a thing and, parse out what it's about. And these seem very formulaically constructed compliments it's doing up top. It understands we did a Street Fighter bit. It understands we talked about pubes. But it doesn't understand the point, of any of this. And in case in point, it tries to pitch us the CEO of a healthcare company, which you don't even have to be a really fucking like radical leftist in America at this point. The entry point for a lot of people was Bernie Sanders and like fucking thinking about healthcare,
Yeah.
as a thing that should not be privatized, should not have CEOs. So I'm thinking like maybe this, maybe this is like an automated thing. I kind of think the CEOs of healthcare companies are scared of getting assassinated now, so they're like, maybe he's like, get them to like me,
Yeah.
put me on the Luigi show or whatever. But it doesn't. I would imagine that not a real human took part in any of this, and this is just this guy's automated thing to try to get him to go on shows and present himself as one of those, the CEO that cares. There've been a few of these figures in recent history of like, I'm the one that like, I lower my paycheck and stuff, and they all end up being complete fucking weirdos and freaks. And they're trying to resolve a thing that can't be resolved by you still being a CEO, I would argue. I think we would kind of all argue. But anyways, if you're listening, Mark Newman, CEO of Nomi Health, just fuck off. No, you can't come on the show. I'm sorry, but I'm glad that you liked Street Fighter bit, apparently.
Yeah, thanks for the listen or the peruse of the transcript, which apparently is drawn up somewhere.
What if it's a real person that wrote that letter that's listening to this and just crying right now?
Yeah.
I thought you really like how I referenced your dark humor and pubes.
Yeah, that could happen, honestly. I can't imagine what healthcare CEO would be. I mean, that's almost worth doing, that interview, to see what the hell happens and, and what he says. I will say, I've maybe have a connection to a certain politician who I'm not sure realizes that. Well, I'll just say Freddie G was contacted by a certain politician who also follows me on Twitter, does not share our politics at all, but wants to talk to us for some reason. So that's something we're debating doing. Let us know if that sounds entertaining to you. If you want more spice on this show.
So we also get emails from politicians sometimes, and I'll check to see if it sounds like it's something in our lane or if it's close enough. And I'm not like a complete hater. Like I'll talk to someone, if they're 90% kind of with us, we'll talk to liberals and stuff sometimes. If there's like a room, if there's enough overlap there, it's constructive on some level. That's going to come up a little bit later in the show. This guy's cool, but I did push back on him from something I read in his book. But we're promoting him, so overall I think it was good discussion, good stuff. But like this is an interesting question, and like when we get emails from politicians, generally the answer is probably no. It's a very thin fucking amount of there's a thin slice of the pie that actually we agree with, I think. But it happens from time to time. But there's this question of like whether you should book somebody you really disagree with, and we've done it from time to time because it's like funny.
Yeah.
Like that's a reason to do that, in my opinion. But there's a lot of content, a lot of slop content out there that's like people like us selling you the idea that they're interviewing like freaks and far right people and stuff like that, in the name of free speech and to better understand them because they're supposedly so suppressed and or whatever. And I was thinking about that a lot recently because there's that like Mehdi Hassan thing going around where he did that stupid Jubilee show. This is becoming more and more of a thing, Jubilee, where you get like Bukkake debated by a bunch of far right fucking Reddit guys or whatever. And it's stupid. And I figured this out a long time ago, kind of like getting asked to come on a lot of stupid podcasts and getting people that wanted to come on ours and really kind of thinking about this. And I think what people don't really get about this is that like, when someone sells you the idea that they had to do that or that they thought they were doing something constructive by talking to those people, they're bullshitting you. Because with that person just wanted to do that. Mehdi Hassan, I don't know, he seems like he has lots of money. I don't know why the fuck he did that. I think he's just wrong. He's just philosophically wrong here. But like, the reason all these like Theo Vaughn podcasts exist where they're like, well, we're going to talk to fucking Trump or JD Vance or David Duke or whatever, is that we live in all democratized media world. Comedians, we don't make money doing stand-up anymore. We gotta have shit like this. And it it gets sold to them that there's a missed opportunity for understanding what a far right thinker is. That you specifically, you great interviewer, comedian person who has learned to talk to people and you understand comedians understand free speech in a way other people don't. You singularly are like capable of getting something out of this that other people can't get out of, and that's not true. The best way to learn about the far right is just to learn about it. Like, you don't need to actually invite David Duke onto a thing to learn about David Duke. There's plenty of information about him in the world. You can just go do that. This somehow always gets thrown out the window as if that's like a ridiculous idea, right? Second of all, most alt media run by people like comedians the comedian is not actually capable of grappling with that person. You actually need somebody who's highly specialized in being able to constantly fucking debunk things that people like this are saying and prevent them from taking advantage of you and throwing spin around the room. Theo Vaughn's a great fucking case study in this. He's had all these people on. He's even now become a person who's like, he believes that that Gaza's a genocide and stuff. And he's coming around, and like every once in a while he says something smart and good, and it's like, he was talking about Trump and like Epstein recently, and a good response to that, you'll see if you click on the replies to this shit, is people going, yeah, why didn't you ask him about that when he was on your fucking show? Right?
Yeah.
If you watch the clips when he talks to these people, he like can't do it. He pushes, he folds, and he wants to be a good fucking host or whatever, and he goes, oh, okay, that's a pretty good point. Mark Maron has a new special where he has a really good bit about Hitler going on Theo Vaughn's podcast and this happening. And that's mother. Props to Mark Maron for doing that, for putting it correctly, I think. But why the fuck did I get on that? Don't do this. That's all I'm saying. Like, don't do the Jubilee thing. What it's doing is actually creating moments of micro celebrity and then creating careers for the fucking weirdos that we keep making memes of, that are the guys doing the Jubilee, like the guy who's dressed like the Hamburglar and stuff like that. This works to their advantage. That's why they're there, not because of their agenda. This is literally where Andrew Tate came from. He was a guy they would make fun of on Tom Segura's podcast, where they didn't understand what the fuck fire they were stoking, and now we have to deal with Andrew Tate. So just don't do it. These are things to keep in mind if you are a podcaster and you're listening. Don't try to bullshit people. Like, it's good for numbers if you have on the freaks, but do it responsibly. Fucking go against them if you can, or don't do it. Or just like don't try to convince yourself that it's somehow going to make communism happen or socialism or whatever. That being said, everyone else you can talk friendly with, but it's good to talk, with responsible theory in mind and stuff like that. Before we get into this today, though, sorry, did you want to say something?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking, because I think it can be a double-edged sword. Like, it's hard to apply any type of rule, kind of as you're saying, like it's hard to apply like the same standard to all these different situations. Definitely it's bad. It's definitely not good to get owned by a fascist. But I think, and I see what you're saying about like they are turning into micro celebrities in some cases. But you could also say that like a lot of people are watching those videos, and like a lot of Americans have different ideas kind of floating around in their heads, and they see it spelled out really clearly, and they see Mehdi Hassan making these points. Maybe that does some numbers for against fascism, but I think it could be kind of all a wash. I mean, it ultimately, I think it's just doesn't really do that much either way, but it does kind of make me think of something we talk about with our guest, which is this to me feels like the modern incarnation of like Donahue, when they were having like Nazis on and debating them and stuff. And this is something we're thinking about, is like, what are people going to look back on today? And I think Jubilee is, I don't really think, I'll admit I like watching it sometimes. I feel like it's hard to say if it's really good or bad. Some of you do learn interesting things about like the progressives versus moderates. sort of musical chairs thing they did was so interesting because so many of the quote unquote moderates were saying things that are like that's not what you're way to the left of like Cory Booker, for instance, or any of the people, you know, in the establishment Democratic Party. So it is kind of like a slice of this weird and fucked up country, but I can also see it has like pernicious elements.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, look, don't get me wrong, it is fucking entertaining to watch. Like, I watch all this shit. It's morbidly fascinating stuff. The guys are fucking freaks. They're, you know, fun to ogle at and stuff like that. And to some extent, you know, the antithesis of this argument is like Sam Cedar. Like, he's good at his whole thing is like fucking
Right.
He trains in a dojo to debate libertarians, and he knows exactly what they're going to bring up and how to debunk it every time. And you can make a lot of fucking powerful arguments that, like, okay, it's good to have a guy who does stuff like that. But I think you need to like be that good at it if you're
Right.
going to do it, because one of the pitfalls of doing it without having that much of a payoff is that the constant just everyone doing this like reifies and reinforces the legitimacy of these ideas and the legitimacy specifically of the premise that those people are outsiders and that they are like unfairly they're the new punk rock, right? They're the actual unheard. And that's a thing that is, you know, fucking, you know me, man, I'm a fucking Chomsky head. I think about all this shit all the time with you know, media and stuff like that. That's a thing that there's like a very direct deliberately explained mission happening with Koch brothers and dark money and stuff. There's a very deliberate like idea that is not true, which is that the right wing is actually being less heard because as we talked about in Manufacturing Consent, the idea that the media has a liberal bias is bullshit. It's a bullshit hinge that they use to put all this stuff on. The media is everything has a right wing bias because right wing is the status quo. So that's fake. And it's a thing that you would hear in the past from fucking shock jocks and like right wing, you know, radio people that are in the era that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
I gotta mention it. I'm gonna just mention this for a second. I'm not gonna go deep into it because we got too much on the show today. But there's a story about some crypto bros that went on a crazy like coke bender in Manhattan and kept an Italian man in a cage because they were their scam was that they would like meet other crypto bros and then torture them until they would give them their crypto passwords. And one of them got loose, and the guy had like bloody feet. He said they had been like using a tiny chainsaw on his legs and electrocuting him, and putting a loaded gun to his head, pissing on him, and pouring tequila on him, setting it on fire, and then pissing on him to put it out.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and he got out, and now they got caught. I mean, believe it or not, they have a picture with Eric Adams at the Met Gala. Like, of course he's in this story, right? But they're it's hilarious. Like their lawyer has one side of the story, which is that this is all like it was a joke. They did all those things as like pranks or whatever. It's a crazy story. It's in the fucking Wall Street Journal, I want to say. But I thought about it a lot because of some of the things in the book that we're talking about today that reproduce themselves. One of those being like Beanie Baby mania and like weird like economic bubble mania things where people are trying to buy as much as possible. And it occurred to me that these types of people, the crypto bros I'm talking about, that's today's Beanie Baby freaks. That's the same thing, you know?
Yeah.
History just keeps reinventing itself. And so it's an echo of an era that we're going to talk about. But anyways, tell me about this this guest we've got and this book we're going to talk about.
Yes, so he's written a book about the late 90s, one year in particular, and had some interesting sort of insights about not the entire like overarching like political trends necessarily, although that's like embedded within it, but the cultural sort of moment, particularly quote unquote low culture, which we get into that term, what it means and how it's counterposed with high culture. So without further ado, let's go to our interview with Ros Benes. All right, we're now joined by Ros Benes, who is the author of a new book, 1999, The Year Low Culture Conquered America. Ros, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, good to be here.
You've been making the rounds. You were on Struggle Session recently talking about this thing. Why don't we start with what made you want to write a book about 1999, which is part of an era that's coming under, we're trying to understand it more now. What made you want to write this book, and what separates this book from other accounts of the late 20th century?
Well, what made me want to write it is just like a handful of really stupid moments that have happened in the last 6 to 8 years where I've seen something in pop culture or in our politics that reminds me of like the trashy entertainment I love as a kid. Like just, one example would be like Hogan beating Gawker with that lawsuit over the sex tape. Just really showed like how pervasive kayfabe was in our society. And there were just a handful of those moments that made me want to like go back and look at the late 90s in particular. And then I focused on 99 because that just seemed like the silliest year out of them all. There's just a little more ridiculous. I'd say the way that it differs is that I focus exclusively on trashy stuff. So there's a lot of books on 90s pop culture and its influence. And there's some books on like the joy of trash and whatnot. But I'm looking specifically at the influence of 90s trash. That's my hook.
You mentioned our friend Rax King. I was reading your book earlier. She's a pal of ours, too. She also writes a lot about pop culture and that sort of thing. Trash. Bad.
Yeah, she was a comp title. I enjoyed Tacky.
That's good.
Well, how do you define that term trash, and how do you differentiate high and low culture? Because that's a theme that comes up a lot in the book. As you mentioned, 1999. There is another book called, I think it's Best Movie Year, where it goes through all sort of the high culture of that year, although some of which in retrospect, might be considered low culture today, but these are obviously subjective terms. How do you feel about the way trash, high, low culture, these things are sort of situated in the way we discuss this stuff?
You have a good point. It's totally subjective, but what I was aiming for was just what is the pop culture that was the most mocked, least critically acclaimed of its time. So like Jerry Springer, there's a ton of people trying to push that show off the air. TV Guide said it was the worst show of all time. It was called cultural rot. Insane Clown Posse's in there because Blender Magazine says they were the worst band of all time. USA Today said they had the worst album ever. And it's just like if you admitted to being a juggalo in the 90s, you would get a lot of shit for it. So, the things that are in there are generally stuff that are retrograde or looked down upon, but that changes per era. Like I have video games in there because in 99, video games are blamed for Columbine. They're considered to be children's entertainment. There's just like a lot of social delinquency that are blamed on them. And now like video games are viewed as pop art and the genesis of a lot of franchises and intellectual property, but that perception is way different today collectively than it was a generation ago. So I'm trying to like see in the 90s what took the most heat, and that's what I focused on.
Yeah, and it's talk shows, video games, pornography, which you have a section on, but you also discuss Beanie Babies. Some people are probably familiar with this phenomenon, how Beanie Babies, probably a lot of listeners remember them as, objects of play when we were kids. But in a way, reading this, it almost seems as if they were the NFTs or cryptocurrencies of their time. What's the whole financial story behind Beanie Babies, how they became kind of this strange asset for a time?
Yeah, they were used in financial speculation during the 90s, like a security, which is very strange. What happened is the Beanie Babies really took off online. They were over a tenth of eBay's total revenue when eBay went public in 1998. And they were like a community of believers who would just kind of hype each other up. A lot of people would follow these price guides. So there would be online price guides where They were written by Beanie Baby collectors who had an interest in inflating prices, but they would act as if they're impartial, and they would say like, the price of this Beanie Baby is going to increase 1,000% over the next 5 years. You need to put it in a Ziploc bag and hoard them, and just hold on to your assets. And enough people acted on that for a moment, the prices did skyrocket. Like there was a time when Bones the dog was selling for hundreds of dollars, and a Princess Di Bear is selling for thousands of dollars. And people are losing their minds. They're committing crimes. There's robberies. There's a death over Beanie Babies. There's people getting out of their cars on the interstate in Atlanta when they spilled out on the interstate. So there was a lot of craziness, and it was just like a total bubble, because then they were never scarce. Eventually that caught up to them. They retired the line, and people got tired of it. And then within 2 years of the peak of that bubble, they weren't really worth much more than their retail value. And I see similarities with NFTs, because it's just like you get this community of believers who like finds a lot of meaning in this particular thing, and they convince others that it has more meaning than it actually, or it has more worth than it actually has. And that is self-fulfilling for a little bit, until you run out of suckers, and then like the people who are left are losing their ass while a few people got rich.
I read this chapter, and it was really good. I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
I read it because I'm obsessed with NFT weirdo people. What's the word? Not positively. Whatever.
Morbid fascination.
Yeah, I don't like them, and I think they're weird and fascinating. And I love Pokemon, and I'm old, and I remember all the Beanie Baby shit, and it was like a weird thing that you have a blip of memory about every once in a while and go, what the fuck was that? Like collective hysteria everyone was in. It was really odd. It was like, yeah, like get a little distance from it, and you go, what hysteria like took over everyone in America over these like little trashy like trinket things. They were on like fucking home shopping TV. Mm-hmm. Which I used to just stare at all the time when I was a kid, because it was on the same channel that you would have to, like channel 3 to play a video game. So it was just when you were done, it was on. I spent a lot of time just kind of vegging out in front of it. And it's a, artifact of a bygone era. But the people on home shopping would have to just keep talking. So they would just have this like kind of sports commentator-esque skill, or podcaster-esque skill, at just like filling airtime and just going like, you'll notice this one here has the the holographic sheen, the fish scale or whatever, and like kind of shit. Really funny shit, right? But I guess I have a question for you though. I don't want to come out too hot on you, but it sounds like you're friends with our friends. It sounds like you went on like Leslie's show, you went on Struggle Session, you're friends with Rax King. The conclusions in this chapter though, and they are, by the way, outside of my pay grade. I'm not an economics guy or whatever, but I think they're kind of interesting to us as anti-capitalists, because I'm going to quote you here for a second. Mm-hmm. Sorry, we're all friends here, but I do. But
you want to shit on me?
You're an anti-capitalist.
Well, it's like a wrestling style, in a wrestling sense. Yeah,
I read your
bring
book.
out the chair.
And so I wanted to talk about this because I think this is an interesting point of conversation that we can have.
Yeah.
You said that capitalism isn't inherently evil, no matter how many young, wealthy, sheltered progressives try to convince you otherwise. So I'm going to push back. I disagree. I think that evil is a pretty good way to describe what's happening kind of at the core of capitalism, because it's a system of distributing goods and commodities that's designed to reinforce an owning class living at the expense of a working class. That's bad in my opinion. But it's something to move past. There's a lot to be said there. That's the anti-capitalist argument, is to evolve past it to the third Pokemon, not the second one, right? And that characterization of leftists, though, is designed to delegitimize people like us, which is why I'm bringing it up, because I think it's not true. Me and Anders are not wealthy. We are not. What do you call it?
I love to be considered young, though. That any description of young for me as a 34-year-old, I will take.
Yeah, we'll take that one. Yeah, of the three, definitely. When they call us young college students, I'm like, yeah, that one. Sheltered, arguably, but there's a roof over my head. You can see it. But we're poor. So I guess the reason I kind of been thinking about that and chewing on it though, since I read the book, is that the implications here in talking about what is going on with financial bubbles around stuff like NFTs and Beanie Babies and Pokemon cards. There's a lot going on there. It's one of the big $1 million questions of society. What is this? Where does it come from? What does it mean? And mass analysis of economics can kind of make your mind glaze over. It certainly makes mine. But I was thinking there's a little lesson in here about like scarcity and like what in vulgar Marxism we refer to as use value versus exchange value, right? Because if you're talking like vulgar economics with people, you go, where does the value in something come from, right? A commodity gets its value from the amount of labor that goes into it, and then it gets a little more complicated, right? Because you might say everything gets value based on how much labor goes into it. So why does a mass-produced cheap Beanie Baby, why does that value go up? It doesn't make any sense, right? It didn't take that much labor to make a fucking mass-produced tchotchke. So then, if you read Capital by Karl Marx, it starts off with this distinction of use value versus exchange value. And, use value is the value that's something is useful, how we would use it before there were markets and commodification. Well, a Beanie Baby isn't fucking useful at all, and NFT isn't useful at all, right? So exchange value is where we land, right? How do these bubbles happen where something that isn't useful at all suddenly is able to have like a scarcity or a false scarcity around it that drives the price up? And you talk about this, I think you are correct in your own book here when you assess this as like speculation, right? But it's really interesting. So this is something about the end of the century, is that there were opportunities economically for speculation where you would have like something like Beanie Babies and NFTs. It's the same thing as echoed, throughout history here the last couple of decades. You have these moments where like the only reason that people are buying a thing that has no use value is because there's a perceived exchange value, but that value isn't even actually because the thing itself is useful. It's because the idea is this is going to be valuable because there are these people known as collectors, right? Supposedly, which is like this big weird myth in the background of all of these hysterias, is that somebody's just out there who wants to buy them. But what actually is happening is that the reason that they're valuable is because there's another person down the line who's convinced that they can sell it for more, so they'll buy it for more, and it's like turtles all the way down, right? And eventually
you run out of those guys.
Right, exactly. Eventually the bubble bursts, and there's no guy behind you, or you can't convince anyone there's a guy behind them to buy more of it. And the fact that that's like possible in our economy, I think, is an anti-capitalist analysis, in my opinion, right? It tells you some things about, you might get into like modern monetary theory from there or something like that. So I think you're an anti-capitalist. You don't know it.
Was there a question somewhere in that?
No, I was just going off.
Well, do you think that the conclusions of your book can lead in that direction, or not? So, because
Well, so the Beanie Baby chapter, I mean, I tried to highlight areas where I think a lot of, even though I don't find capitalism to be as inherently evil as you guys might, there's still a shit ton of irrationality. Like if you're get an economics course, the classical version is like, people are going to do what's in their own interest. Do they really? They do a lot of weird shit, like spend money on Beanie Babies that they don't have. So, I demonstrate that with Beanie Babies, but then I give a lot of little anecdotes of like that happening broader. But I also connect it then to some of the deregulations that, happened under Clinton that then led to the dot-com bubble, because this is all going on during the dot-com bubble. It's like the insanity of the Beanie Babies, I don't think is entirely separated from that. It's like a low-grade version of putting your money in a dot-com. Like if you were an institutional investor in the late 90s and you had a irrational belief in the power of the internet, you were going to spend a lot of money on a dot-com that had no legitimate business prospects. And that happened in droves. If you were like a regular working person who owns no stocks, you might get caught up in this everyday trinket that people are buying and selling because you got sucked into a eBay vortex or some sort of like fan community where people are hyping this thing up.
Yeah. Well, you point out in the book that the Glass-Steagall deregulation that Clinton does, repealing Glass-Steagall, that happens, I think, the day after the Pokemon movie premieres, which I remember going to as a
November 1999, right?
Yeah, as an 8-year-old sitting in the theater, just swarming with children. The projectionist was overwhelmed, but Clinton obviously is responsible for not just financial deregulation, but media deregulation. Did that play a role? The Telecom Act in the mid-'90s, did that play a role in the rise of quote-unquote trash TV?
Yeah, deregulation did play a role in the rise of a lot of this trashy entertainment. Like Beanie Babies, not so much, but some of the other stuff I'm talking about, you could tie it to a particular deregulation. So, like reality TV taking off in the late 90s, early 2000s, when you saw like a huge proliferation of reality shows, especially from the broadcast networks. That was a result of the FinCEN rules being repealed that used to prevent TV networks from producing and owning most of their primetime programming. Once they're able to do that, they just went for the lowest common denominator, produce the cheapest stuff, that they can, because they want to like be able to license it out and have something that has like no cost, but still has some sort of viewership. The Reagan administration, getting rid of advertising allotments. Used to cap how many minutes of ads per hour it could be on TV. Reagan eliminates that, and that gives us stuff like G.I. Joe, and Ninja Turtles, which I like. But then like you also get infomercials. So like, Kevin Trudeau selling his fraudulent supplements, Girls Gone Wild, Miss Cleo, all that stuff like comes about from a deregulation. But then what you're getting at with the 96 Telecommunications Act's the biggest media deregulation of our lifetime that let everyone be in each other's businesses. There were no separations at all between being a cable company, a phone operator, like anything. If you were in one business, that did not prevent you from being in another business, which it used to. That contributed to the rise of these huge conglomerates. As those companies got bigger, they cut current events and like standards and practices, and they just tried to push like what they can get the cheapest hit with. And I think that's why like Viacom in-house could produce Howard Stern as a star across like 10 different forms of media, because it was cheap and effective, and they suddenly had holdings across everything due to like a series of deregulations that allowed them to get bigger in a way that they wouldn't have been able to 15 years prior.
I feel like that with like moments like the late 90s, like and like this kind of emphasis on trash culture, like Jerry Springer and stuff like that, it's like a snapshot. We're all looking at it, and then there are different explanations of like what causes what. And so there's a lot of like decline of the empire sort of art about this time, where it sort of argues that like the culture is the cause, like things were getting so out of hand. Everything was so trashy. Women were dressing in mini skirts and stuff, and no values anymore. And that's supposed to be kind of like the cause, right? The fucking the upstream or the downstream or whatever dynamics are what I'm talking about here. And but I think like, so why did deregulation happen, right? Because of capitalism, because someone had acquired a lot of power and then was able to influence the government and the state and the thing that regulates everything, and in their own interests they deregulate, and then as an outcome we see different stuff on TV. That would you agree? Would you disagree?
Yeah, to an extent, but I don't think the rise of trash TV is necessarily a bad thing. Like, I'm a fan of a lot of this stuff, and I don't know. I guess I'm not someone who has good taste, but
are you an Insane Clown Posse fan?
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm down with the clowns.
They got some good stuff. I mean, they say you either can love them or hate them, but I think they're okay.
Have you ever read their book where they talk about how they killed a butterfly when they were young, and now every album is dedicated to the butterfly? They're actually quite artistic.
Yeah, Behind the Paint by Violent J. He says a lot of stuff in that book that I think is very interesting and introspective. I think he's a lot smarter than he ever gets credit for.
Yeah, definitely trash culture is something that like to look at it as lesser than is like kind of a classic misstep, and it's like a byproduct of all this is that you do learn like a lot of this stuff actually is more valuable in a lot of ways, has more to say, you know.
Right. Or that there's like because Oprah comes up in the book, and it made me think of how she's kind of counterposed with Jerry Springer, Geraldo, etc.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, more so in the 2000s, but also in the 90s, to go on Oprah was a form of catharsis for a lot of people. Because I remember always thinking that as a kid. It's like if I did something really, really bad, I get like today you get dragged on social media. In the 2000s, you get an opportunity to go before Oprah. If you have millions of people mad at you for something,
Or you could go on boot camp, like if you're like on Maury or something.
yeah, there's that too.
If you're one of those like real shithead teenagers.
Yeah, if you're like a bad teen, yeah. But if you're like the Million Little Pieces guy, like the guy who wrote the fraudulent memoir, Oprah was like a way to kind of atone for your sins, and it was viewed generally. She was seen as a more legitimate actor than Jerry Springer. But as you point out, there's quite a lot of content there that she did that, in retrospect, is fairly similar to the Jerry Springer show, for instance. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, with Oprah, her shows, certainly doesn't have the style that like Jerry Springer or Ricky Lake have, where they just want to have like, sensational teenagers or young people like caught in love triangles and stuff. But she's also got like complete frauds on her show, like people who are involved with the Satanic Panic, who just made a lot of claims that certainly weren't true. I mean, one of the people on her show, Lauren Stratford, also claimed to be a Holocaust survivor, and that was like totally not true. She gave us Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz. I mean, both those guys are charlatans, especially Dr. Oz. Over half the stuff he's said on his show is not backed by medical science at all. And she's just, produced a lot of like, popularized a lot of like a new age kind of nonsensical way of thinking. So I'm cool with Oprah. I just think if we put her on a pedestal and all these others down below them, we're not analyzing the situation quite correctly, because her show could be as ridiculous as others, but she was polite and styled her show in a way that was less sensational than those. So she often gets left off the hook.
There's like a level of like a sheen of respectability around Oprah that I think maybe makes her a little different than some of this other stuff. But I mean, I don't know, maybe like trash culture in general, it would be foolish to try to make it all, it's all good or it's all bad or whatever. But I mean, it does seem like a lot of institutional power has sort of laundered itself through shit like Oprah. Like Dr. Phil is also really bad. He, lately, if you keep tabs on him like I do for some weird reason,
I haven't thought about Dr. Phil in a while. What's he doing now?
He was out here with ICE in LA, like doing like ride-alongs with them and shit.
Oh, no, I think I did see a picture of, that's crazy.
And he also was like at UCLA when they were fighting against the fucking student protesters. He was on the side of the police fighting the protesters and stuff. He's like involved in stuff. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is tinfoil hat territory or something to be like, Dr. Phil works for the government or whatever. But like clearly, like, interests of the powers that be have, they have an interest in media, and there are monetary connections with people, and there's people like him that are like clearly, people in the world of trash. There are all these like opportunistic, want to be the spokespersons and face of things and stuff like that. And he probably saw a lot of dollar signs in,
I mean, Dr. Oz damn near won a Senate seat.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump is this. Like, he's
right.
He's the biggest example of that,
And we're talking the day we're talking, Judge Jeanine Pirro now has a high-ranking position in the Trump administration, who is, I guess, not a reality TV star per se, but on Fox News may as well have been. But I am curious because what I think of as the reality show, you mentioned Boot Camp, that comes about in like 2002. Survivor, I think, is 2001. You got Big Brother, all these shows in the like very early 2000s, like just after the period you're talking about. What happened to lead to the transition to that style of quote unquote reality TV?
Well, I mentioned this just a little bit earlier, like the FinCEN rules, financial interest and syndication rules, repealed by '94. There's a little bit of a lag, but I think after that, that's when you see a little more incentive to produce reality shows. They're still experimenting with the format in those years. Like you have the Real World and some other stuff on cable, but it doesn't come to network TV in a big way until like the late '90s. And you know, some of that, it's not just like the typical reality shows. The game shows kind of fall into that. Like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, those types of shows where the TV networks were just their directive was like make a hit as cheaply as possible, and now we can make it in house rather than having to go out and license a lot of our primetime stuff. And the reality stuff just was an easy way to do that.
Didn't that happen because of a strike?
Which thing?
Reality TV.
That did, yeah. So there was 2 strikes that helped reality TV thrive because it's a way to bust unions. Really, I mean, it's non-unionized labor, and like think about a reality show. They don't have like an ensemble cast that they bring back every year and have to negotiate. It's like all your fucking contestants are gone, and like it's the new wave of people. So there's no chance for like collective bargaining. But there was a strike. I think in the late '80s, that's when we got Cops. Like that was like the first strike and like America's Most Wanted and that shit.
Man.
But the other strike that contributed to the reality TV becoming really popular is a little bit later than the period we're talking about. It's in '07. And there's a strike. And that's like when you have like the Kardashians and like just a ton of other shows. I think one of the Housewives shows might have started then. So when there has been strikes, there has been a boom in reality TV to fill the production shortages and to keep costs low. But the period I'm looking at in the book is kind of right between those 2 strikes.
Right.
I got you.
Yeah, and it is a period also where wrestling is a huge phenomenon with a lot of people, but especially young men. I don't think we had the stations for wrestling as a kid, but my life was still managed to be consumed by it, just like acting out the moves that my friends saw. We would just brawl each other outside for hours based on this chain of like someone remembering a move that someone else saw. But a discourse I remember very strongly from this period was, is wrestling fake? Is wrestling real? Is it fake? Which seems to today, wrestling's still very popular, but you don't have that same kind of discourse. Is that something you found in your research, that kind of question? And what was that, I guess, getting at, if anything?
Well, so the real versus fake thing, that there's actually, we've been talking about regulation. There's some internal deregulation that happens with wrestling, and by internal, I mean it's not coming from the FCC or like the federal government, but it's like wrestling pushing for it on a case-by-case basis per states. Linda McMahon comes out, I can't remember the exact date. I think it's like early '90s, and admits that it's scripted. And she does so because she wants to get the WWF out of paying state athletic commission taxes and other fees.
Interesting.
So they come out and they just admit to like it's scripted, and what that does though is it actually becomes a promotion. Like it doesn't, old school wrestling people think like, well, if we admit this and we tell everyone what's happening, who the hell is going to watch? Like, who wants to watch if they know like the Undertaker and Kane aren't really fighting? But the reverse happened. The ratings grew after that, and part of that's coincidental, but it also like the wrestlers could go and be themselves when they're not wrestling, and they got to do a lot more promotion of wrestling, like like The Rock being able to be Dwayne Johnson, or like Hulk Hogan going on the Tonight Show and like being himself. There were just more avenues to promote themselves when they could act like actors or other ordinary celebrities without always having to be in character 100% of the time.
That's fascinating. Yeah. By the way, Linda McMahon, now, of course, goes without saying, now the Secretary of Education. I'm trying to imagine telling that to a person in 1999 and what their reaction would be. But another character in the book, Howard Stern, who is also still around, but you don't hear much of him anymore. He seems to, I mean, he always had like liberal politics, I guess, but now he's like kind of pretty libbed out and just does his talk show every now and again.
Yeah, he
But
just kind of interviews celebrities now, right? Like he's
right. And I remember he interviewed Hillary Clinton, which to me it was just like, that's another thing. You show somebody in 1999, Linda McMahon's going to be the education secretary. Howard Stern's going to interview Hillary Clinton. Like that interview, you could imagine, like if that happened in 1999, one could only imagine what that would have been like. But a totally softball interview. He was not asking her to flash her genitalia, for instance. Yeah. Which is something that he used to do during.
He
this
totally
time.
would have if like presidential candidate who was a woman was on his show in the 90s. He totally would have asked her to flash.
Yeah, right. Which makes me that because it seems one conclusion from the book could be that like this stuff is all much that's like actually bad now. Now we have or that it wasn't actually that bad in retrospect. But is that one area where like just the misogyny of the Howard Stern show, for instance, and other phenomena like that, maybe Girls Gone Wild, is that a case where things have actually gotten a little bit better, i.e. less misogynistic?
Well, with Howard Stern, it might also just be that he's older too. I mean, shit, he's probably like 60 something now, right? Like,
Yeah.
So he probably that tends to change someone. But about things getting better, I don't know. Maybe I think they just moved to different places. Like that sort of stuff maybe not be like, you might not see infomercials for something like Girls Gone Wild on cable TV now, but holy shit, you can find that community very easily online if you look for 10 seconds, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I guess I just mean the like the production practices behind Girls Gone Wild. There are some horror stories about, as you might imagine. But I also wanted to ask too about crime movies, because I was thinking of this reading the book, and I just rewatched really Out of Sight, which is 1 year off, 1998, Steven Soderbergh movie with George Clooney and J-Lo. And it struck me how a lot of these like pre 9/11 movies about crime are a lot more permissive in the attitude towards, like, the law enforcement characters will have a much more permissive attitude towards flipping and becoming a criminal. And that's like that's, it's in pop culture, but it seems like there's a really stark change where you don't see movies like that after 9/11. What's going on in the zeitgeist there? Because I think I heard you say something sort of similar to that in another interview.
Gosh, that was just making me think of the movie Heat with Pacino and De Niro, and like, those guys, like, they're talking in the coffee shop. It seems like they can be buddies, even though one of them is a criminal mastermind, one's a police officer. And like at the end of the movie, I think a lot of people are rooting for De Niro, who is like the bad guy. Like, you actually want the bad guy to win the standoff.
Yeah.
At least that was like the way I perceive that movie. And I think there's a lot of that in pop culture at that moment, especially in pro wrestling. Like look at Stone Cold Steve Austin. Like, you have, like Big Boss Man, the police officer isn't the guy that everyone like wants to cheer for or root for or put in the main event of WrestleMania or see as a good guy. The like good guy is the one who's flipping off his boss and chugging beers and being defiant to authority. And he could break the rules and do classic heel shit, or he could like save the day and be a baby face. It really depended on the match and the situation. And people really went for that.
Yeah. And it definitely, 9/11 seems to be a turning point in a lot of ways, but there's definitely a lot more, a lot less anti-heroes, it seems, although they do come about again eventually, especially at a time when The Sopranos is a very popular show, which I believe that also launches 1999.
Yeah,
or is it 98?
Launches in 99. Yeah, so I guess it's kind of starts pre 9/11, but then goes afterwards.
Right. And that's an example of something that's like simultaneously high and low culture, as it were, like depending on who you talk to. Simpsons is kind of the same way. It's like, you know, it
Yeah.
was condemned by the first Bush administration, also has references to like Greek mythology and all these things. But how did people make sense of because that's today very popular again. It's had a resurgence to Sopranos. How did people make sense of it when it came out in 1999? Was it recognized as just pure smut, or was there some immediate recognition of, well, this is maybe art?
From what I've seen, it's just that the Sopranos was like universally acclaimed. Like
Hmm.
the reviews of it. I mean, there were, you know, especially when they have like the episode where they where that one of the mafia guys beats a prostitute to death with his bare hands. I think there was a lot of outcry over that particular episode, but overall, the series, as it was airing, seems to have been very well received. But I didn't watch it as it was happening, so you know, my take on it's probably a little retrospective, going back and looking at this shit.
You know, there's stuff though that does start off as probably considered kind of low culture, and then like eventually there's like it's absorbed and approved of by institutions. Like I'm thinking about like superhero movies right now, and then like
Yeah.
how like in recent years some of them have won like Oscars and like fucking I mean everything everywhere all at once was technically a superhero IP, and it won like Best Picture and swept the Oscars. And I don't know. I remember kind of feeling like, yikes, you know, like that's sign of the end times kind of thing. But it only feels that way because you have some sort of like cop in your head that's telling you that the institution of the Oscars is somehow like this sign of legitimacy or whatever. And it's just all kind of one big like cycle, a circular blender process or whatever, I guess, in my opinion. And like something I think about right now is the term slop, because you know, whenever you talk about the end of the '90s, everyone talks about this great word trash. You know, it gets used to look back on like Jerry Springer and pro wrestling and ICP and all this stuff. Trash TV was kind of like the way it was conceived of. And there's a few things from like this era that have reconstituted themselves pretty similarly, with a slightly different name, and it's maddening to think about because you see people kind of falling for it again. Another one of those is like a lot of the shock jocks during this time were, which is an old timey term for, you know, now we call them an edgelord, I guess. But they would fixate on PC culture, right? And nowadays everyone's obsessed with woke. It's like the same fucking thing, the same people kind of peddling it. And the term for trash, I would argue, is happening now is probably slop, because you know, when we talk about how a lot of this stuff came out of deregulation of like art and media, you know, someone might make an argument that is the bite of the forbidden apple, and that is the reason that like things got worse in a lot of ways, and that maybe we should go back to having more regulated like media and stuff like that. I don't think that's true personally. I think it's way more complicated than that. And I think that like you need to understand that that's not true in order to understand how to talk about slop now, because with AI, that's a form of deregulation, right? That's a form of changing the way all this stuff works materially, and it having these outputs.
Well, yeah, it's risen faster than any regulation or laws have been able to keep up with it. So like it never even faced regulation.
Yeah,
Right.
and it also just deconstructs like the shit that regulation is even there to protect, like just basic, you know, it's whatever the fuck word I'm trying to say. But
Automation.
like, there you go. Yeah, I don't know why I put a bunch of Z's in it. But people say, you know, it produces slop, and we're gonna get all this slop, and you know, the kids on their iPads are gonna be fed nothing but these like AI generated like weird things. And that's true, but like I guess what I would argue is like yeah, but also like art under capitalism, 99% of it is also slop. It's just slop that's made by a person. So the trying to moralize about, you know, whether or not to automate things kind of misses the forest for the trees, in the same way that trying to argue about whether or not it was good to deregulate everything in the 90s, you know, is good or bad. It's a thing that just happened as a natural process. And it led to us having these things, which, as we discussed, some of them are good, some of them are bad, right? So fucking Dr. Phil sucks, but some of these other things are really cool, like ICP. And like now with this, like I guess I'm arguing is like a new incarnation of this concept with slop. I don't think it's like good to try to preserve the way that art is made. The big picture is art is not free under capitalism. It's you're either making kind of human-made slop or robot-made slop. And again, I'm just meandering because I'm trying to tie it.
But
together.
wouldn't a lot of art be shitty or sloppy under any economic system where like only like a small percentage of it, breaks through and really reaches people, and the rest like are throwing shit at the wall and not, connecting?
Well, see, that's where this gets really complex to me, because I think that begs the question, like, what is good or bad? What is the point of art? And I think under capitalism, the point of art, we are kind of brainwashed to conceive of the point as being exchange value, whether it's productive, right? But like the point of it actually isn't productive. It's just the point is just to do it. So like it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad in the terms of being like really technically skilled. I mean, I would argue art. The goal would be the art is free, it's for everyone, and we no longer even have this stupid rubric we look at it through. Where we go, is this going to be the top 40 hit, or is it a guy banging on a bucket or whatever? It's just that guy's having fun banging on that bucket. That's fucking art as much as this ornate, elaborate thing is. And it kind of fries people's brains though, because you have to be a philosopher about this and pull all the way out into the macro and go, what is the point of culture, right? But if you're going to talk about trash culture, you got to go, is it trash because it's because it's lowest common denominator? Does that make it bad or good inherently? Does looking at culture this way mean X, Y, or Z? And I think that's why it's kind of mystifying and confusing to look at like the end of the century and ask these questions, because it's none of the above really. Culture is the outcome of all the other underpinnings of society.
Yeah, I mean, I see what I think. Maybe what you mean to say, Jake, is like if high and low culture may not exist under a different sort of economic system, which is very far away from us, but this kind of dichotomy really does get reinforced by class structure, and you have things like Insane Clown Posse that are not seen as legitimate largely for class reasons and things like that. But it is interesting looking back to 99 in particular, where you have two movies that I think of a lot as being really indicative of that year, Fight Club and American Beauty, which are in many ways very different movies, but kind of about the same thing, like this almost like millenarian sense of like some change is coming, but also people are very dissatisfied with consumer society. But they have totally different sheens to them. One is Academy Award nominated, and one is seen as kind of like, maybe a punk, maybe an indie film by some people. But today they, to me, seem like kind of the same genre. But I guess when we're thinking of decades, and I wanted to ask you this because like this is a discourse that comes about now where I hear people saying that there's going to be no way to really differentiate the 2020s and the 2010s. Like it's like decades have ceased to exist essentially. Which I understand, but I also I remember people saying that about the 90s in the 2000s. And I think there's something to the more time gets added, the clearer something looks in retrospect. So 10 years is really hard to make sense of. 20, it starts to be a little more coherent. Is that something you experienced in your research? And do you think that today will have like a coherent, like there will be this was the 2010s and this is the 2020s, or are we just in some new like mess?
I think each era will be coherent. I don't know if it's always going to fall in like the 10-year increments, but something, it wasn't even research. Something that made me really think like the 2000 to 2010 is a really distinct period. Is I've just been like texting with friends, and we'll be sharing old pictures of like the shit we were wearing, when we were in high school or college, and it's like these baggy ass like acid wash jeans and like like backwards hats from Stephen Barry's and shit. Like that's totally something a lot of people were wearing in like 2005 to 2009, that you wouldn't really see much, like the look of fashion, let alone the pop culture. I think 2000 to 2010 is way different than where we are now, and the way that like the 70s and 90s look different. But like you said, you need some distance to get away from that. Now, one thing that makes the decade probably like a little less pronounced between each other. That's why I think it might not be a decade per se, but like more like I don't know if it'll be 15-year increments. I don't know what it'll be exactly, but is we don't have as much shared culture as we did in the 80s and 90s. So like there's no TV show that like is as popular as Friends was at that time, because Netflix makes its million shows and they canceled like a lot of the good ones after 3 seasons. Like Taylor Swift and Beyonce and stuff are doing great, but overall, like music is more splintered. And I think a lot of this stuff is good. There's that allows more like people to create interesting stuff for niche audience rather than everything having to have mass appeal. But like with media splintering like that, and not everyone watching the same shows, not everyone listening to the same music, I think it'll be a little less like the 70s to the 80s is so different. I don't think it'll be that pronounced, but I do still think there'll be something. Like I do think that era to 2010 is way different than what we are in now.
Yeah, that's I think about this shit all the time. The buzzword would be like monoculture. It's like the death of the monoculture.
Yep.
In the 80s, everyone in your high school knew who Guns N' Roses was, and in the 90s, everyone knew who fucking Nirvana was. And like there's different ways there's different like pinpoints you could put down to try to mark like the death of it. Mine is Game of Thrones. Like I think that was the last thing that everyone knew about kind of at the same time while it was on. But whatever, it's kind of a complex process. But the democratization of media is like a double-edged sword in that regard, where depending on whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that this happened, on one level, it killed that way of organizing culture. And I think, I don't know, you could be like a weirdo who's like, we got to go back, return and have a sign in the street and like, we got to go back to Game of Thrones, but like, it's not going to happen. I feel really complicated ways about it though, because, on the one hand, nothing will ever feel like that again. On the other hand, it's the reason we have a job, here is because democratization of media changed things from where, the old world, you had to have access to a studio. Someone had ownership of it. You had to pay a certain amount to get in, yada, 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 right? So when technology changed and the internet changed in a way that like created the ability for people like us to make media, now you have this sea of podcasts and fucking YouTube shows, and there's a million things. And it's like slop territory. Like you could call it, you could think of it in this way of denigrating it because it's low art in terms of like listenership and audience. You could make an argument high art is something that has a bigger fan base and therefore is better, but that's really what we're talking about is just democratization. Something that had a bigger audience than us in the past. Maybe it wasn't because it was better. Maybe it was just because things were organized in a way to where you had to get past the post in order to get a thing onto like a channel, like on TV or something like that. And then they got to have all of the audience because the audience had nowhere to go, So I guess what I'm thinking about in terms of like this democratization of media idea is it's tricky because a lot of libertarians agree with me about this, and I don't agree with them about their entire worldview. But it's interesting. It's you kind of look at it under a really close lens to figure out why are we on the same tip for a minute, because those people do often agree with us until we get to a certain point. Some of them are very good about Gaza, but it's like, why do you hate Israel? Something else going on there. And I think a lot of them, they would argue that this democratization of technology and media and culture would lead to a situation where everyone can be a podcaster and a rising tide lifts all boats and whatever, right? And that's kind of good. I don't think that actually works out on paper, like mathematically, economically. But I do think that this is like, it's weird because there are good podcasts and there are bad podcasts. There's good alt media that came out of this, and there's bad alt media. So it's not inherently good or bad. It's just like I don't know. It's like this weird. It's hard to analyze because it's like a moment that we're like in, but it's like kind of just the new terrain for a fight or something.
You know, a lot of this democratization of media, changing up how media is distributed, you could trace it back to '99. That's when Napster and TiVo debuted. You know, Napster probably the bigger impact, even though the company itself was short-lived due to lawsuits. But I mean, you really have a great reorganization of how media is disseminated, how you can build like your taste, what you're into, what you're exposed to. It decimates the music industry, especially the recorded aspect of the music industry.
Really interesting though, because it's good for the listener.
Yeah,
Artists got mad about it, right? Like,
yeah, because they lost their ass.
Yeah, because they lost their position of being able to have like a scarcity that we kind of look at and go, that was kind of artificial scarcity, right? Like, you just were living in a world where we had to pay you per physical tape, but then as soon as we came up with MP3s, you don't actually own every single one. So like Lars Ulrich, you know, some people have argued recently that hey, maybe he was actually right, but I don't think he was. I think that like maybe the what's going on with Napster is that it sucks because he's losing his privileged position of being able to sell us Metallica music, but music is something that shouldn't be commodified. So this is actually a step in that direction on some level. Like, art is for everyone is something I say a lot. And, you know, I would rather not have to choose between buying one record a month for my entire life. Like, I like living in a world where you can access it more. So that's our side of this, but it is like this weird double-edged sword.
I guess that brings me to question as we're rounding out here. In 1999, that was 26 years ago now. 26 years from now, I guess what do you predict? This is a tough question, but what do you predict to be the version of this book then? What will people see as the high and low culture, and will they I guess, and this goes back to AI, right? How like it's impossible to predict where that goes. But you draw a lot of parallel, or you draw out some seeds, I guess, that were planted in 1999 till today's culture and politics. What do you see the future holding based on what we have floating around now?
In 26 years, people will look back on this time and say, those fucking podcasters ruined our country.
They totally will. And they might be right.
Yeah, could happen.
I don't have a great answer for you. Whenever I'm told to predict something, I'm like, oh god, I'm gonna look like a dumbass because what I'm saying is not gonna end up true. But what you mentioned slop earlier, yeah. If you write this book in a generation, the title would probably be Slop, and you'd be looking at all this computer generated stuff that people now have anxiety differentiating between that and the human made things. But these debates may seem very quaint a generation from now. This may be intuitive to today's kids when they're adults, what's AI and what's not, and what's good about it and what isn't. Whereas now we're going through it for the first time and have anxiety in a way that they probably won't.
Right. Well, I think that's a good point to end it on. Ros Benes, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you and your work?
You can just find me on my website, rosbenes.com. I'm on Twitter, but I don't post that often.
All right. We are not the same in that respect either. I'm at Anders Lee here. Jake's at Feral Jokes. Follow the pod. Subscribe to our Patreon. Got an episode about Syriza 10 years ago in Greece. That was really interesting to dig into. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening, and Ross, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Also, if you're in Los Angeles, thank you for coming to Laugh Block, the anti-fascist comedy show that I threw at Lyric Hyperion, and it went so well that we're doing another one. So if you're in LA, August 28th, it's a Thursday night, I think, 9:30. We're doing the next edition, so I'm gonna do some more stand-up and have some more fun guests and stuff. I'll put the stuff up for that soon. I have to book it and all that shit. Yeah. All right. So thank you again, Ross. Anders, always a pleasure. It's